A little boy was starving in the snow, his eyes hollow with hunger as he pressed his face against the restaurant. Inside, Grace, an overworked waitress, noticed him. She quietly took a hot bowl of soup meant for the trash and slipped outside. "Here, eat slowly, sweetheart," she whispered, crouching beside him. But before the boy could lift his spoon, the restaurant door flew open. "You thief! Feeding strays now? You're fired!" Her manager shouted. Tears welled up as Grace begged, "Please, I need this job." But what she didn't know, the quiet man in the back, he was no ordinary customer. He was a billionaire in disguise, and her one act of kindness would spark a movement that would shake an entire empire. Grace Nolan was running on fumes. The clock above the kitchen read 9:42 p.m., but it might as well have been 3 in the morning for how drained she felt. Her back ached from bending over trays, her calves screamed from hours of constant walking, and her head throbbed with a pulsing reminder that she hadn't had a real meal since a granola bar at 6 a.m. The Marlowe Bistro, with its polished mahogany bar and glittering chandeliers, was a haven for Manhattan's elite. But for Grace, it was a battlefield, one where the weapon was her smile and the armor, her threadbare shoes. As she cleared the last table near the window, she saw him, a small figure, still, unmoving. A boy no older than 6 stood just outside the glass. His coat was too thin, his cheeks wind-burned red, and his eyes were fixed on a half-finished bowl of pasta someone had left untouched. Grace paused mid-step. He wasn't begging. He wasn't even crying. He was just staring, silent, still. A memory hit her like a punch. Her own son, Evan, 2 winters ago, asking if ketchup on toast counted as dinner. She blinked hard and turned quickly toward the kitchen, swallowing the tightness rising in her throat. A bowl of soup sat untouched under the heat lamp. Chicken and barley, steaming gently, the order canceled minutes earlier. Grace hesitated. Her heart pounded louder than the clatter of dishes behind her. She glanced left. No one. Right. The line cook was distracted, and the hostess was deep in conversation. She picked up the tray, added a warm roll, grabbed a napkin, and stepped out the side door into the cold. The snow bit her arms through the sleeves of her worn uniform, but she hardly noticed. She knelt beside the boy, lowering the tray beside him on the stone bench. "Here," she whispered. "Eat slowly, sweetheart. It's hot." He looked up, startled. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He nodded silently, his small hands reaching for the spoon like it was made of gold. "Thank you," he finally said, voice raspy from the cold. Then came the sound. Slam. The restaurant's back door burst open behind her. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mr. Fulton's voice cut through the quiet night like a whip. Grace stood up slowly, shielding the boy with her body. "It was going to be thrown out," she said. "He's a child. He's starving." "That's not your decision to make," he barked, face red. "That's theft. Take off your apron. You're done." Grace's voice shook. "Please, I need this job." "You should have thought of that before feeding strays," he sneered. Tears welled in her eyes as she untied her apron and handed it over. Her hands trembled, but her spine remained straight. "He needed it more than I needed this job," she said. And just like that, Grace Nolan, tired, broke, and brave, walked away from her only income. Unaware that behind the restaurant glass, a man in a dark coat had watched the entire scene unfold. Silently, intently, and with the beginnings of something stirring deep inside him. Julian West sat alone in a corner booth, tucked between a marble pillar and a frosted glass divider, barely noticeable to the bustling servers and preoccupied diners around him. He wore a simple pair of jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a beanie pulled low. His clothes didn't match the clientele of the Marlowe Bistro, but that was precisely the point. Julian wasn't just any customer. He was the only son of Conrad West, the founder of Westbridge Hospitality Group, one of the largest restaurant empires in North America. From luxury bistros in Manhattan to food chains in San Diego, Westbridge's name meant profit, precision, and lately a growing reputation for being cold and corporate. That's why he was here. After years abroad managing expansion projects in Europe, Julian had returned at his father's request. But this was no homecoming. It was a mission. "Find out what we've lost," Conrad had told him. We built this empire on heart. Now it's all spreadsheets and lawsuits. So Julian went undercover. No entourage, no announcements, just quiet visits to each location, watching, listening, looking for the soul his father claimed they had misplaced. He had been doing it for weeks, and truthfully, nothing had stood out until tonight. He had just finished his lemon risotto when he noticed her, the waitress, Grace. She moved like someone who'd been on her feet too long, shoulders tense, steps careful, eyes scanning for spilled water or raised hands. She wasn't polished like some of the newer staff, but she carried something far more rare, sincerity. Then came the boy. Julian hadn't noticed him at first, not until he saw Grace stop mid-stride and stare out the window. He followed her gaze. A child, alone, pressed against the glass, bare hands tucked under his arms, staring at a table where a half-eaten meal still steamed. Julian lowered his phone. Something shifted inside him. He watched as Grace vanished into the kitchen, then emerged minutes later with a bowl of soup. His eyes narrowed. What was she doing? And then he saw it, her kneeling beside the boy, offering food, whispering gently. Not for applause, not for tips, just because. The manager's outburst followed like a slap to the face. Julian flinched, not at the firing but at the public shaming. Grace stood her ground, even as her hands trembled, even as she was humiliated. She didn't beg. She explained. Calm, unapologetic, human. That was the moment Julian knew something rare had just unfolded before him. Later that night, in his penthouse apartment, high above the city, Julian poured himself a glass of scotch and replayed the footage from the discreet button camera embedded in his coat. He froze the frame on her face. Not pity, not desperation, compassion. He leaned back in his leather chair, heart pounding slower now but deeper. Who are you, Grace Nolan? He whispered to himself. And why does your courage make me want to burn down everything I've built? It took Julian 3 days to find her. He sifted through employee records, tracked the termination form, and quietly called a former shift supervisor who vaguely remembered her mentioning a diner in Brooklyn. He found her at Sunny Spoon, a tiny corner cafe squished between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner. The neon sign above the door flickered like it hadn't been serviced since the 80s. Inside, the air smelled of burnt toast and old fryer grease. Grace Nolan was wiping down a table with the weary determination of someone who had no choice but to keep going. She was thinner, pale, her blonde hair tucked messily into a loose bun, her uniform too big for her frame. But her eyes, though tired, still held that quiet fire. The same fire he had seen in the snow that night. Julian didn't introduce himself as a billionaire heir. Instead, he slipped into a booth near the window and waited for her to approach. When she finally noticed him and offered a faint, polite smile, he stood and said calmly, I'm Jay. I'm working on a community food project. Someone told me you might be a good person to talk to. Grace raised an eyebrow. Do I know you? He shook his head with a small, practiced smile. You don't. But I saw something you did. Something I haven't been able to forget. Her posture stiffened. If this is about Riverstone, I'm not interested in charity. I'm not offering charity, he said, his voice steady. I'm offering a seat at the table, a real one. She folded her arms. Why me? Because you didn't wait for permission to do what was right. You didn't do it for praise or attention. You just saw someone in need, and you acted. She stared at him for a long moment. Then finally, and what is this table exactly? Julian leaned forward, lowering his voice. A test project, a nonprofit restaurant model. No prices, no shame. Guests pay what they can. The food's simple, the mission is dignity. We serve good meals to people who've forgotten what it's like to feel welcome. Grace blinked. And you want me to, what? Cook? I want you to lead, he said. Help shape it. Build it with me from the ground up. She laughed once dryly. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. I know that anyone who would give up their only income for a hungry child has the heart to build something better. Grace stared down at her hands, then at the apron around her waist. Her voice softened. I have a son. I can't take risks. We'll work around your schedule. I've already arranged for childcare at the community center we're partnering with. That stopped her. She looked up again, this time with a sliver of something unexpected in her eyes. Hope. Okay, she said slowly. 30 days. That's all I can give. Julian nodded, smiling genuinely now. That's all I need to prove this works. Neither of them knew then. 30 days would change both of their lives. Weeks passed, and the neighbor's table became more than a pilot project. It became a beacon. People came not only for meals, but for warmth, for connection, for the dignity that Grace had quietly infused into every part of the place. Volunteers stayed late, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Families who once waited in line now returned to donate groceries or sweep floors. Grace ran the kitchen with precision and heart. Julian, still known only as Jay to most, focused on logistics, sourcing, and funding. Together, they had built something rare. But secrets are like cracks in the foundation. Left unchecked, they grow. It started with a local food blogger, a soft interview request, a profile piece on the project's mysterious co-founder, Jay. He always avoided cameras and never gave a last name, which made her curious. A simple search led to deeper digging. One phone call to Westbridge Holdings confirmed it. Jay was Julian West, son of Conrad West, CEO of the very company that had fired Grace Nolan in the snow just weeks before. The headline broke in the morning. Billionaire behind anonymous food project is heir to restaurant empire that fired its hero Waitress. The internet exploded. The comments ranged from admiration to outrage. So this was all a PR stunt? I knew something felt off. He used her story for a redemption arc. Or maybe he actually changed. But Grace didn't read the comments. She was too busy trying to process the article that had been texted to her by 3 volunteers, her sister, and even the school nurse from Evans Elementary School. Her hands shook as she clicked the link. His photo was there, Julian, not Jay. Clean-cut, corporate, wearing a suit and standing beside his father. She felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. By the time Julian walked into the community space that afternoon, Grace was waiting. She stood near the pantry shelves, her arms crossed, face pale but resolute. You sat there, she said before he could speak. You watched me get fired. You watched that man humiliate me, and you said nothing. Julian's mouth parted, but no sound came. I trusted you, she continued, voice trembling. I let you into my world. I let my son get to know you, and all this time, you were him. I didn't mean to lie, Julian said finally. I didn't know how to tell you. At first, I just wanted to observe. Then I saw what you were doing, who you are, and it stopped being about the project. Then what was it about? Her voice cracked. Pity? Guilt? A way to redeem yourself by fixing the mess your company made? No, he said firmly now. It was never pity. I was ashamed. Ashamed of what we had become. Ashamed that we treated someone like you as disposable. You. But you still let me believe you were just some guy trying to help. Julian stepped forward. I am that guy now. She stepped back. You should have been honest. I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you wouldn't trust me. She let out a bitter laugh, tears forming. You were right. And with that, she untied her apron, set it on the counter, and walked past him. Julian didn't try to stop her this time, because he knew some truths hurt more than lies, and some mistakes, no matter how sincere the apology, can't be undone in a single conversation. The boardroom at Westbridge Holdings was silent, but the tension was thunderous. 12 directors sat around a polished mahogany table, expressions ranging from cold curiosity to veiled irritation. Suits, ties, portfolios, all the symbols of power lined the room. In the center stood Julian West, no longer hiding behind Jay, no longer anonymous. He wore no tie today, just a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a look in his eyes that none of them had seen before. Something raw and unshakable. You embedded yourself in a nonprofit under false identity, one executive began. Why? Julian didn't blink. Because I needed to see who we were from the inside, he said. No corporate veneer, no stage tours, just truth. And this Waitress, another director said, his voice laced with disdain. Why does she matter so much to you? Julian inhaled deeply. the memory of Grace kneeling in the snow flashing through his mind like a photograph etched in fire. Because she did what we've forgotten how to do, he answered. She led with heart, with courage, with no regard for reward, and we punished her for it. Murmurs rippled around the table. She was never a pawn, he said, voice firm now. She was the compass. That sentence echoed in the room long after he stopped speaking. Meanwhile, outside the walls of privilege and power, a quiet storm was brewing. A customer who had been smoking outside the restaurant the night Grace was fired had posted a blurry video clip online. It showed Grace kneeling beside the boy, whispering gently, her face full of warmth. The caption read, "She gave him soup. They gave her nothing." The internet caught fire. Hashtags trended. Articles flooded in. Hero waitress fired for kindness. Celebrities weighed in. Food bloggers turned her into a folk hero. And Westbridge Holdings? Public opinion slammed like a tidal wave, but Grace remained silent. She avoided cameras, declined interview requests, focused on raising Evan and picking up extra shifts where she could. Until one night, while folding laundry, the evening news caught her ear. Julian was on TV, standing at a podium in front of press and board members alike. "She reminded me what leadership looks like," he said, voice steady. "Not the kind that comes with titles or shareholders, but the kind that gives when no one's looking. The kind that acts when it's inconvenient." Grace sat frozen on the couch, a sweater limp in her hands. "She changed the way I see the world," Julian continued. "And if we have any hope of redeeming this company, it's because of her." No excuses, no spin, just truth. Evan wandered in, asking for juice, but Grace didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen, because in that moment, she saw something she didn't expect. Not a CEO, not a liar, but a man who was finally standing up for her, not because he had to, but because he believed she deserved it. The grand opening of the second Neighbors Table branch in Harlem buzzed with quiet anticipation. Volunteers lined folding tables with bowls of fresh fruit and trays of warm bread. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling of the renovated community center, casting a soft amber glow over the space. Guests trickled in, some homeless, some working class, others just curious. All were greeted the same, with a smile and a warm, "You're welcome here." Julian West stood near the door, hands in his pockets, heart unusually quiet. The board had approved expansion 2 weeks ago, and this new branch was his chance to prove the first hadn't been a fluke. But something still felt missing. He had sent Grace the invitation. No pressure, no expectations, just a folded note and a quiet message. "You built this more than anyone. It's yours if you want it." She hadn't replied, so when the crowd stirred and heads began to turn, Julian assumed it was the press arriving early, until he saw her. Grace, hair down, no apron, no shadows beneath her eyes. Just a simple navy blue dress that moved with the breeze as she stepped through the doors. She didn't look like someone returning for closure. She looked like someone reclaiming what was hers. Without a word, she walked to the small stage. Volunteers stepped aside instinctively, as if they'd been waiting for her. She picked up the microphone, cleared her throat, and looked out at the room. "I'm not here because of headlines," she began. Her voice was calm but steady. "I'm not here because someone told me to show up." A pause. "I didn't feed that child that night because I wanted to thank you. I didn't do it for cameras or praise. I did it because it was right." The room was silent. "I didn't know anyone was watching, but someone was." She looked toward Julian now, eyes locking with his. And he didn't just watch. He listened. Julian walked forward slowly and took his place beside her. He reached for the second mic but paused, letting her finish first. Grace looked back at the crowd. "We don't need heroes," she said. "We need people who are willing to do the small good things, over and over, even when no one claps." Julian took a breath and lifted his mic. "I came here to observe," he said simply. "But what I found was her." A quiet murmur of applause began. Then it grew, until the room was filled with clapping hands and tearful smiles. They stood together on that stage, not as boss and employee, not as a billionaire and a waitress, but as two people who had lost something and found something far greater, each other, and a mission they could share. Snow had returned to New York, but this time it wasn't biting. It was soft, like the city itself had exhaled. And within the glowing halls of a restored public library, now transformed into an event space, the citywide Neighbors Table Gratitude Night was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the tall ceilings. Candles flickered on rows of long tables lined with comfort food and handmade centerpieces crafted by schoolchildren. The room overflowed with faces, familiar, hopeful, changed. At the heart of it all was Grace Nolan. She moved with ease now, no tray in hand, no worry on her shoulders. She stopped to greet volunteers, poured cider for a group of elderly guests, then knelt to tie a child's shoelace. Her navy blue dress had been replaced with a soft green one, her hair loose around her face. Julian watched her from a distance, leaning against the brick archway near the entrance. He wasn't the man who'd first come here in disguise, trying to assess a broken system. That version of himself had been calculated, controlled. This version was real. Then quietly a boy approached the stage. He looked about 10, clean coat, bright eyes, and a bouquet of yellow daisies clutched tightly in his small hands. He walked straight up to Grace. "You probably don't remember me," he said, his voice nervous but steady. She turned, curious. "You gave me the best meal I ever had," he said, offering the flowers. Grace froze. It was him, the boy from the window, the one who had been cold, hungry, and invisible, until she knelt and offered him soup that night. Tears welled in her eyes. She dropped to her knees and embraced him. "I remember you," she whispered. "I always will." Applause swelled around them, but Grace barely heard it. After the event ended, as the last plates were cleared and candles dimmed, Julian stepped beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her, the way you look at something sacred. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver key on a leather tag. "No ring," he said, "but something better." She looked down at it, confused. "It's a house, upstate, big enough for Evan, for guests, for quiet, for growth," he said. "A home, for your son, for us, for anyone who needs it." She stared at the key, her lips trembling. "Julian, no pressure," he said softly. "It's not a proposal. It's a promise, a future, built on everything real." Grace stepped forward, wrapped her fingers around the key and looked into his eyes. "I say yes," she whispered. "To the house, to the future, to you." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They just stood there, foreheads touching, hearts open, and finally no more secrets between them. A waitress and a billionaire, a bowl of soup and a boy. All of it had led to this. Not an ending, but the beginning of something extraordinary. In a world often consumed by noise, competition, and self-preservation, sometimes it's the quietest moments. A bowl of soup, a whispered "eat slowly," a key pressed gently into someone's hand, that remind us of what truly matters. Grace and Julian's story isn't just about romance or redemption. It's about the courage to do what's right even when it costs you everything. It's about second chances, about seeing the invisible, and about building tables long enough for everyone to have a seat. Not just the wealthy, not just the loud, but the forgotten, the tired, the brave. And in today's America, where inflation burdens families, where kindness is too often mistaken for weakness, this story speaks to something deeper. The belief that dignity should never depend on a paycheck. Maybe you've been Grace, maybe you've been the child, or maybe you've been the one watching from the corner, unsure whether to act. So we ask you, what would you have done in Grace's shoes? Do you believe one quiet act of compassion can really change the world? Have you ever experienced a moment that restored your faith in humanity? Tell us in the comments below. We read every one of them, and your story might inspire the next. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, cry, or simply believe again, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Here at Warm Soul Stories, we tell tales that don't just entertain, they heal, they connect, they remind us all. It's never too late to build something beautiful. Thank you for listening. Stay kind, stay human, and until next time, keep the soup warm.